and I invite you to subscribe to this YouTube channel for weekly videos about making your own comics, making your own webcomics. And thanks so much for tuning in again. I'm having a blast doing these live streams, and today I wanted to talk about something that can greatly speed up your comic making process, and that is using reference and using shortcuts. And I know as comic creators, we're often very busy making our pages. We're drawing, we're scribbling, we're inking, we're coloring and doing all the things. And sometimes it's good to sit back and just evaluate your process and see if you can optimize. And I know it's a controversial kind of like thing sometimes. I still run into artists who think that they should be able to draw everything by heart. I'm not in that camp. I am a very big advocate of using reference, and I don't mean copying things or stealing things, but what I mean is actually looking at pictures and looking at real life, looking at movies and all kinds of other mediums in order to get inspired and to figure out how stuff is actually working in real life. Because yes, we look at things during the day, but we don't look at things with the intention of knowing how they work and knowing how to draw that stuff. So you might kind of know in your head what something looks like, but when you're asked to draw it, it's harder. And I always notice in my own art, I can't just tell whenever I used reference or not. First of all, my anatomy just greatly improved when I started doing live drawings and doing more drawings from photos, and by actually doing anatomy like courses or videos or stuff like that, because just a knowledge of the basic skeleton and the muscles, and you don't have to know all the names and stuff, but if you kind of know where everything is, it really can inform your drawing. And even then, like, you have to keep practicing, or else, at least for me, it like slips away again. But then I can always tell when I've used reference, for example, to design something. Having more input about how different certain things can look, can really inform your designs and can make them, they can just make them prettier. Is basically what I'm saying. It can just make it better. You can come up with ideas that you would never have thought of just because you see some weird creature, for example, online. You're like, I never even know that animal existed. And then you can take elements of that animal and rework it into your fantasy creature that you're designing. Something like that. The same counts for costumes. If you have like a basic knowledge of how clothes work, maybe even what kind of certain kinds of clothing people were wearing during the ages, that can really help you make informed decisions and make your costumes look more real and like they're actually belonging to a certain kind of world. Because if something is based in reality, we just recognize it. But if it's done in a nice, creative, original way, then that can be really helpful and can really, really sell something to your audience. So I'm a very big fan of using reference and just getting that information, getting inspired. It helps you to draw in 3D. It really helps you to come up with new ideas that you'd never thought of. And there's absolutely no shame in using reference. The old masters did it all the time. They would just have models brought in. One of the most extreme examples that I heard was I was at the exhibition of Lawrence Alma-Tadema, who made these crazy complex paintings, and he was a very big fan of like the Roman kind of era. So that's where most of his paintings are based on. He knew everything about that period. He was constantly studying stuff, but also bringing stuff into his house. Like eventually, because he became so rich, he had a huge house, and he shipped all kinds of furniture from that age, or stuff that was made that looked like it came from Roman age. He like shipped it all to his house, and he had like so much of that stuff just lying around. So he was being constantly informed by that. And then there's this famous painting of his, and I never can remember the name because it's a very complicated name, but it is the painting where he paints a ton of people on a kind of banquet, and they're being smothered with rose petals. It's a really weird painting. It's called The Roses of something with an H. and then some Roman name. Yeah, I'm not even gonna, like, I see kind of the name in my head. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that. But there's this rumor, or not a rumor, I think it's actually true. Yeah, because I read that at the exhibition. He had tons and tons and tons of rose petals shipped to his house so he could paint them accurately. You know, and it worked for him. It's a little extreme. That's a little extreme, but like, he did studies. There were sketches of his in that exhibition. He did studies beforehand, figuring out how a horse works. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's even like painters who just everything you see in their paintings is painted from reference, and they used it for, you know, lighting, to figure out lighting, to figure out forms, to for the objects that they depicted in their paintings. Like, I don't know where that idea comes from, that using reference is cheating, but it's really weird. I think it's a kind of like modern thing. I don't think that the old masters would even consider that. It would be like, yeah, you think I know how everything looks like just randomly? No, of course not. I need to study that stuff. And it's the same with, I always compare it with dancing, for example. Like, you wouldn't drop a dancer, no matter how well versed they are. You wouldn't just drop him in a performance of the Nutcracker if they've never danced it before. Maybe there's dancers who know that by heart, I don't know. But you know, it's a complicated piece. You wouldn't just let them sit in the audience and would be like, yeah, just watch it one time and then we expect you to be able to dance the whole thing. No, they practice. They need to learn the choreography, and they need to practice it. And dancers practice. So why do we as artists expect ourselves to just be able to do something out of the blue? It makes no sense. We need to study stuff and practice, and then we can bring you the final result. There's nothing wrong with using reference. Also, it just speeds up your process. If you're making comics, especially if you're making webcomics, you're pressed for time, use the reference. I have a giant Pinterest board for Recollection City. It's huge. I have all kinds of stuff on there, like a lot of clothing, interiors, weapons, a lot of swords, guns, you know, stuff I need for the automatons that are going to be featured in the comic. You can even put actors on there. If you have characters in your head that you kind of know an actor who has that certain kind of face structure that you want, put the actor on there. And like I said, you don't have to copy them. You don't 100% have to use actors' faces. But, you know, oh, that's a nice cheekbone, you know? That kind of stuff. The same with, like, the swords I have on my board. Like, I'm not gonna literally use those swords, but I'm gonna look at, like, how did they design the hilts? How did they design the blades? How does the sword work? What kind of materials? What kind of colors did they use? And I use that. And then I make my own version of a sword for a certain kind of character that needs it. You know, and we have to design so many things in a comic. Like, sometimes I wish I had more time to design something, like really, really design it. But I have to keep reminding myself I'm not an animation studio. I don't have people who can search for reference for me, then design things and then pass it on to, you know, the next person in the pipeline. It doesn't work like that. And sometimes you just need to, you know, speed it up or cut corners somewhere. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it gets the work done. But also, more importantly, reference makes your artwork better, and it makes your comic better. And that, in my opinion, is the end goal. My goal is not to make a comic that I can say, I use no reference, I just drew this out of my head. If that's your goal, then do that. It's a different kind of goal. That I want my comic to look as good as possible, which is my goal. And then I want to make it as fast as I can. It's also a goal. So use the shortcuts is basically my point. And then when I say shortcuts, what I mean with that in comics, and I plan on doing entire series. It's also a thing that I've been writing a lot about because I'm working on a new course. I do have my course, Your Comic Journey, which is a long mentored course. That also is reflected in the price and the length of the course. And now I'm working on a smaller course that actually helps you get started on comics. So it's really, really the starting point. Then I give you assignments in it that if you pass through the entire course, by the end you can start your comic. You can just start, and you will have a good base from which to go on. So I'm working on that course. It's going to be cheaper, so more people can actually buy it, and it's going to be automated as well. So you're not, I'm not bound to having a certain kind of time where the course goes live. That will always be the case for Your Comic Journey, my long premium course, because that one is mentored, and that one is in a group. If you want to have more information about Your Comic Journey, you can go to pencilsandstories.com/yourcomicjourney, and you can put yourself on the interest list. That course is specifically designed to take you through the entire comic process, and we go from a blank page to a finished short comic in the course of 10 weeks. And that is just learn the comic process from start to finish. We go from idea to story to how to actually, pencil, ink, color, all the things. So that's Your Comic Journey, and the other comic course I'm working on is more focused on getting started, because so many people, like I talked about last week, are afraid to get started. They're afraid to make mistakes at the beginning. They're afraid to not being able to know how to make pages and stuff, especially in the beginning. It's awkward. Like I said last week, it's an awkward process at the beginning, and you need to learn the ropes. You need to learn how to make comics, and that is what a lot of people feel held back by. So that's my goal with that new course that I'm working on at the moment, is to really help you get started and help you start your comic well as well. Thinking some things through, but also making some quick decisions, so you can just go and start, and you don't have to wait like years for some feeling of being ready, because that feeling is also just not going to come, but it's going to hold you back a lot. Yep. So that was a little sidetrack, but what I also am working on in that course, working into that course, is the shortcuts and template files. I have like a template file for my comic. All I have to do is duplicate it. Like even my layers that's a template. My layers are all, I don't have to think about them. I only have to fill the layers up. That's all I have to do. It's so super easy. And then, use things like 3D models, if you know how to do that. It's something that's on my list to do. Use the shortcuts in your programs. I use Photoshop actions, for example, like for really stupid, simple things that only take 3 clicks to do. But if you have to make a lot of pages, the 3 clicks are gonna add up to a lot of clicks, instead of doing one little Photoshop action and the entire thing is just, it's working out. For example, I use a Photoshop action to, when I finish a Recollection City page, it's huge, and I use that to cut off the bleed area, because I'm going to save it for the web. That's the end goal of that action. Saving the page for the web means cutting off the bleed that I need for print, resizing the page to smaller page size, and saving it to a certain kind of folder, and then closing the file, because so that I don't accidentally save over the original file with the smaller file. Nightmare. Just thinking about that. And that's it. So I'm finished with a page. I'm like, I'm finished. I click the one action. I see stuff happening on the screen really fast, and then the file closes, and I have an empty Photoshop program, and I'm like, this page has been filed, and it's done. It's just really, really helpful. I only came up with a lot of that stuff when I did a few pages. So for example, my template file, I probably worked on that during page 1. I cannot even remember when I made that. But then the folder structure on my hard drive, and especially things like Photoshop actions, like having an action just to fill up all the panels with a flat color, for example. Just having the panels. All I need to do is selecting all of the panels, clicking the action, and it just automatically fills it on the right layer with a color, deselects it. It's that kind of dumb little Photoshop actions that really, really helps me speed up the process, and it just makes it feel more automated. Tool presets. I know it's harder in programs like Procreate, but I know that Clip Studio Paint, Photoshop, all those programs have built-in toolbars. You can even save the workspace in Photoshop. So I have a comic making workspace that has all my tools in the places that I want them. And then I have my tool presets, and I have everything in there, from the kind of selections that I use to my brushes to the exact lettering text tool settings. Like if I ever do something else in Photoshop with the text tool and I'm working on Recollection City again, usually the text tool is already on the right settings because I open my template file, but I have the tool preset just to be sure. I just click it, I click the preset, and I know that the font and everything is the right size that it needs to be. That's all super helpful. You know, I have my, like I said, brushes, certain kind of coloring brushes, like I have a big airbrush, like the really sharp eraser. Let's see, what else do I use? Gradients. I use gradients a lot. So the gradient tool is in there with the exact settings that I need. Like just taking an afternoon to kind of do all of that in Photoshop. It's the same when working on a page and you have a very complicated background. It's just, sometimes it's really helpful to just mask it all off and just have different masks on different layers, or even flat it, like have different layers of your background on each own layer. So all you have to do is like Control click, or Option, I think it's on the Mac, and then click with your left mouse button, and you know you have a selection of the exact area. Just taking a few moments to set that up in your file, and not just going in and constantly running into the same issues. Sometimes it's good to just stop, think, okay, it's more helpful if I just take like 10 minutes now, make a few selections, mask it, put it in the channels. There's a lot of ways to do the same things in Photoshop. Or in Procreate, I think, I don't know if you can you save selections in Procreate now? I think you can. Like doing something like that, or even in Procreate, just make those layers again that you can easily select. Setting up your folder structure in your layer panel, that kind of stuff. It just saves you so much time. I also do the same with whenever I start a new scene. I just make a little floor plan. It's like 5 minutes work, and I know where everything is, and I have way less consistency errors in my comic. Same with if your character has a new costume, I always think I know what it looks like, and then later on I look back and then suddenly something subtly changed, and then I have to go back and redo it. It saves you so much time if you draw the character once, you color him, cut it out, print it out, put it beside you on the page, have it on a layer so you know it's there and you can check it. You can check if you have all the buttons in the right place, or if you didn't forget a belt or jewelry or whatever it is. So slowing down a bit, evaluating your process, evaluating, like if you constantly have those continuity errors, for example, like stop and think, like, how can I prevent that from happening so I can go on a little bit faster? That's really helpful. And then, you know, use things like 3D models. I even see comics in webtoons, and I know a lot of the featured authors, like the time pressure is like crazy, and they have huge episodes on webtoons. They will just use I think it's from the Google SketchUp library, or I'm not sure what it's called lately. They will just have stock backgrounds. They will have stock houses. Some even use photos, just a photo of a sky. They don't even draw over it because they don't have the time. It looks a bit jarring, maybe, but it gets the job done. And in the end, I think that's the end goal for them too. Like, I want to have a sense of place of where the character is, so I need it. I don't have time to draw all those backgrounds. Drop in the 3D models, drop in the photos. You know, as long as you're not, you know, taking somebody else's photos, it's fine. You know, if you need a sky, for example, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going outside with your phone, taking a photo of the sky whenever you have really great cloud shapes, going back in, dropping that photo in your comic, maybe changing it up a bit and publish it as is, or just draw over that. What's wrong with that? You know, it's your own photo. It's your own creativity. It's what you need for your comic. There's nothing wrong with that. So I encourage you to, if you're currently making a comic or being in some sort of creative process, to look at your process where you can maybe optimize some things, speed things up, make it easier for yourself. Just having the folder on your hard drive with your template file, your reference folder, and maybe, you know, I don't know what you need for in your process. Just having that, being able to duplicate it, just opening it up, saving it as a new file, being able to just go, you know, having a thumbnail layer and just start sketching. That if that saves your time, I encourage you to look in your process, evaluate regularly, you know, update maybe some old tools, some old actions that you might already have, search for what other people are doing. You know, just having a file that has all your specs, like the size of your comic, the brushes that you use, the names of them, you know, the way you save the file name, the way you do your file name, so all your pages, your finished pages, show up in the right order in your folder because the file name is the same, just with a different number or something. You know, just having that so you don't have to think about it every single time, but you automate as much as possible. It's really helpful. You know, Photoshop actions are the best. You can even have like an entire folder of, you know, a chapter of your comic, and you realize you need to change something on all of those pages. What you could do is grab one page, do the thing, record it as an action, and then let the action play on all of the files in that folder, in one folder. And it will just, it's so satisfying to watch. You see you see Photoshop opening all your pages, performing the action and closing them all again. It's just so satisfying to watch that. If you have the technology stuff, you know, use it. Same with if you work traditionally, you always use kind of like the same color. Just make a little note of the colors you use. Make the floor plans for drawing your comics. Like, just think about where you can optimize, you know, pre-cutting paper, you know, so you have a good stack of them, so you don't have to do that when you want to start drawing. Like that kind of stuff. Having your tools ready, have them in a nice place so you can just grab them and just go. Having your reference, making a nice reference folder binder. I could go on, but that's what I wanted to share with you today. It's time-saving stuff because comics take so much time to make, and where you can cut corners. There's nothing wrong with that. Make smart use of your time. Work smarter, not harder. That kind of stuff. So again, if you want to stay updated to everything Pencils and Stories, everything course related maybe, go to pencilsandstories.com/extra. In any case, that's my email list. Sign up. I will let you in on any news that I have, new videos, new updates, but also new resources. I occasionally make fun little goodies that you can actually get through my email list that I send to my email list subscribers. So go to pencilsandstories.com/extra to sign up for my email newsletter, and look around. There's info about my course, Your Comic Journey, on the website as well. There's a resource list with all kinds of free resources and paid resources that I've found on the web and that help me make comics. And I do have a Gumroad shop. If you want to see my template file for Recollection City, I actually offer it as a download in my Gumroad shop. So you can see what my layer palette looks like for a page. I also have a sample page in there that you can see how I use all of those things, because I do use masks on layers, for example, and that kind of stuff. So if you want to see what a comic file looks like, then I encourage you to go to my Gumroad. That's gumroad.com/pencilsandstories, and buy it. You will support the YouTube channel. Money will go towards new supplies. I eventually want to hire an editor and website costs, that kind of stuff. So if you want to support Pencils and Stories, Gumroad is a good place to just make a small contribution, and I would be so thankful if you did. And I hope that the resources on there are helpful. That's my main goal, to provide you with more resources. So I guess that was it. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next week. I think we have one more. Yes, next week is 25th of June, so still June. And I will go live again, and I will hope to see you then. Have a good day, and go out and make some comics. Bye, guys.